Oh, yeah, they are able to be seen.
I'll get her. Yeah, be all right.
Yep.
I'm over.
Aye.
It was trading back there. So we did.
I don't know presentations. I don't know if he was supposed to.
Okay, I'd like to call the regularly scheduled board meeting for September 20th to order. Will you all please rise for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Petrie, Mr. Cole.
Mr. Eggleston? Here. Mr. Enders?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mrs. Mungold?
Here.
Mr. Novinger?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Minnick?
Here.
Would the secretary please note that we met in executive session prior to tonight's meeting for personnel and legal matters?
So noted.
Do we have any members of the public registered for comment tonight?
No one registered.
Then to start us off this evening, it looks like we have Jamie Doyle.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. You should each have a copy of my handout in front of you, and much of this will look familiar. It's really just an update to the original plan that we've been talking about for quite some time. I'm going to start on the inside cover just to talk a little bit about market conditions and interest rates, as I usually do. As always, this is 3 snapshots of the same index. This is the MMD curve, which stands for Municipal Marketplace Data. And what the top snapshot tells us is, believe it or not, the red line where we currently sit is still below historic average rates. You can hear all the doom and gloom in the news, and certainly rates are not at all-time lows anymore. But most people are surprised to see that long-term fixed rates are still below historic averages, which is a good thing. The middle snapshot just shows this index going all the way back to 1993, so you can get that historic perspective and see where we currently stand on the far right. And the bottom is just a blow up of the red box in that middle chart, so you can really see what's happened in calendar year 2020, 2021, and so far here in calendar year 2022. So if you start on the left of that bottom chart, you can see the big spike upward when COVID became a reality. You can see the absolute all-time low interest rates in August of 2020. And you can see how things have wiggled around since then and mostly increased during calendar year 2022 so far. We've seen some reprieves over the course of the calendar year, but you know, we're kind of right about where we were at the peak of COVID if you measure straight across there. I'm going to skip over the next page. There's no new information on page 3 that you haven't seen before. I just highlight that bottom section. As always, the IRS doesn't let us just go borrow money because of interest rates. You have to pass the reasonable expectations tests, which certainly you are far enough along to meet those expenditure tests if you so choose. Likewise, on page 4, that page might look familiar. I won't belabor all the strategies we employ when we're putting together a plan of finance. I would just point out in that first 1B, your allowable index increase for the current fiscal year equated to about 0.96 mils, so just under a mil. So keep that in mind when we start to look at some numbers in a minute. And I know that's for the current year, and it's not necessarily for the upcoming years, but that's kind of an important metric as we look about at the future. Page 5 is just your existing debt portfolio. So As always, I monitor this page for refunding opportunities should they arise. And the top half is gross debt service, meaning principal and interest on your two outstanding issues. And the bottom half is net state reimbursement that you receive on those old 2020 bonds. Page 6 is the important page. So this may look familiar. This is the overall plan of finance. So, you know, in column 4 was your original 2020 issue. In the blue, in column 1, that's the $6 million that we did earlier this year to go toward your projects. And we always plan for a step 2 borrowing to occur ideally after you award construction bids so that you can get the size of that exactly right. So step 2 has been adjusted to reflect the potential changes in your project in terms of sizing and the maintenance building addition as well. And so you can see in box number 2, these two financings together, along with your roughly $2.4 million of ESSER's cash, total $15,069,000, which is right around the number that I think that you've been considering recently. The timing of this borrowing is for these purposes, March of 2023, so not immediately, but we'll look at an overall timeline in a minute. It's never too early to start planning. And you can see down below in column 7 what this step 2 borrowing of $7,135,000, again, subject to being adjusted after you award construction bids, what that might conservatively look like down below in column 7. So at the end of the day, after this second borrowing, you'd be left with column 8 for annual debt service budgeting purposes. In column 9, you can see the millage equivalent of that. And then column 10, that's a new column since we last talked. That's capitalized interest. So what that is it's one-time money used to phase the millage more gradually into your budget. Because if you didn't use some one-time money in fiscal year ending 2024, so the next budget year coming up, you'd be left with column 9. And in 2024, that's 1.28 mils, which is too high. Remember, 0.96 mils was your full allowable index increase this year. And we all know you have other needs in your regular operating budget. So we're suggesting in column 10, $165,000 of the borrowing in step 2 go toward phasing that interest in calendar year 2024. In column 11, your indirect cost savings, that number has not changed in an amount, but we did adjust the timing of it based on your timeline. That was originally, if you looked at your last handout, slated to begin in 2024. We've pushed that out 1 year to 2025. And when you take the capitalized interest in column 10 and those indirect cost savings in column 11 into account, at the end of the day, column 12 is the net impact on your budget, which in millage is column 13, which is below the 0.96 mil mark that I mentioned in every year. And you already have the 0.67 mils in your current budget. You budgeted for that when you put this year's budget together. So the real change is to upcoming budget year 2024. For the increase. If you look at the last page, page 7, you'll see a sample motion that would authorize the financing team to proceed if and when you're ready to proceed. You'll notice the amount is blank. Again, that's going to depend on the bids that you award. And the sample timeline at the bottom, this is an update this evening. I left the date blank besides authorize the finance team to proceed with the motion up above. And I suggested dates that are kind of the earliest I think you could proceed. They all say we're later after them on the rest of the timeline. But at the earliest, I think you could consider a maximum parameters resolution in January. That would allow you to lock interest rates in February. Again, we'd like that to be after you award construction bids so you know exactly how much money you need. And then settlement would occur roughly 35 days later. So again, it's an update to the original plan and really nothing has changed from that original plan other than the sizing and the phasing in with that little bit of capitalized interest. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this time. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, because everybody always asks this, so everybody's waiting with bated breath. Federal Reserve Committee that controls the short-term overnight lending rates meets today and makes their announcement tomorrow. And the market's already pretty much priced in 0.75%. Always prices in anticipation ahead of time.
Any questions from any board members for Mrs. Doyle? Okay, thank you,
All right.
Amy.
Thank you.
Next is committee chair summary reports. Mr. Minnick, Human Resources.
Yeah, so we had a human resources meeting on the 6th at 5 p.m. You guys have the minutes of that committee meeting in front of you. There was a couple of personnel issues we went through. Talked about the mental health grant and what we're proposing using that for. And then a couple contract services that came out of committee. So you guys have that. We'll be approving it, but you guys have the minutes. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Jason, you are also budget and finance. Anything to report there?
We did not have a budget and finance meeting.
Okay. I am educational policies. We did not have an educational policies meeting. Mr. Novinger.
We did not have a meeting.
Thank you. So then we have the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 16th, 2022, and the Human Resource Committee meeting of September 6th, 2020. They are presented for approval. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for those meetings as presented?
So
Motion by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Enders. All in favor? Okay, next we have the board member liaisons. Mr. Miller, Capital Area Intermediate Unit.
So my takeaway from the last meeting was their plans to make changes to their Keola online learning platform, which would then impact our Miller Story Academy platform. Significant changes. Dr. Say basically said it's going from where it is now to 3.0, not just a minor step. So we're looking forward to that. They're looking to identify those changes by end of November. That's the time frame that she's able to give us now, which will affect our kiddos in the North Grade Academy program.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, Hack.
Nothing.
Okay. And Act 32, Mr. Petrie.
No meeting this morning.
And PSBA, Mr. Eggleston.
nothing good.
Thank you. Moving on to the business office reports, Mr. Petrie.
So we'll start off with the district financial account reports. There's 4 of those, as we mentioned last month. So we have the general fund, the capital reserve account, the Pliget 2022 Geo Bond Series account, and lastly, the food service account. All of them are pretty well straightforward this month. The only thing I would ask that you just take a look at is in the general fund. You can see, as we discussed in the past, we're moving the money out of Truist over to Mid-Penn. You can really see that happening in the general fund report. We did have one deposit come in from JP Harris, a little over $500,000 that came into the Truist account. We moved that over to Mid-Penn as well. So we kind of left that open at Truist just to catch anything that comes through here. But we're about at the point where we're going to go ahead and close those accounts down. But that's really, in the general fund, you can also, for those that are interested, see that we're doing pretty well on our Chromebook insurance. Parents seem to be taking advantage of that. There's a deposit in there for that. I think it's $3,000, if I'm not mistaken. But those are really the highlights of the district financial account reports.
Okay, the district financial account reports for the general capital reserve, Pliget 2022 Geo Bond and food service accounts are presented for approval. Do I have a motion? Mr. Enders, second, Mr. Miller. Mr. Petrie, please call roll.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the budget status reports. We have the revenue budget summary and the expense budget summary, looking at how we're comparing to this year's budget in both of those categories. Not a whole lot of excitement in either of these. We're running a little ahead of schedule on revenues and a little under budget on expenses, which are both good things. Nothing abnormal there to point out to you.
Okay, so do we have a motion for the revenue and expense budget summary reports as presented? Motion, Mrs. Gray, second, Mr. Eggleston. Any board member questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Enders?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Harris? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold?
Yes.
Mr. Novinger?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
And we have the activity accounts, which are reported from each of the building offices there. If there are any questions in regards to those activity accounts, I would certainly look to our building principals to help answer those.
Okay, do I have a motion for the activity account reports from the high school, middle school, and elementary schools as presented? Motion, Mr. Eggleston, second, Mr. Miller. Board questions or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Enders?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold?
Yes.
Mr. Novinger?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Okay, and then lastly, following all the financial reports, we would ask then for the approval of the bills and disbursements for this month.
Do I have a motion to approve the bills and disbursements for August 19th, 2022, August 26th, 2022, September 2nd, 2022, and September 20th, 2022 as presented? Mr. Miller, second. Mrs. Gray, board member questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston?
Yes.
Mr. Enders?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold?
Yes.
Mr. Novinger?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Okay, and that will conclude the business office report.
Okay, so next we have Mr. Leiter, Supervisor of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
And let me jump in real quick. As you see on the agenda tonight, we have a different layout of having those different administrators go first tonight to present not only their reports that you have a copy of, but also then too, if there's anything on the agenda down below that'll be board action tonight, that they're able to speak to those. And so, go ahead, Mr. Leiter.
Good evening, everyone. Basically, two items on the report that I posted to the agenda. The first item has to do with the professional development that staff went through on September 2nd and what they'll see on October 10th. And you can see the trainings that are occurring that I listed there for elementary, middle, and high, and special ed staff. What I'd like to highlight from that is what we worked on with relationships first. Dr. A was here virtually with us to meet with the committee during our September 2nd in-service. She was here to visit last week with students in the Relationship First Committee last week on the 15th to 16th. And what she started working with us on was driving the change from focusing on excuse me, the relationships that we have with one another as adults as we work in the building, and now focusing that on connecting it with students. And what I'd like to just say in thanks to a couple of our staff members, Bobby Prowse and Sally Schaefer really have taken an active part in really trying to connect our staff and having that forefront in their minds with the activities that our students are doing. So as evidence, Bobby Prowse sent out an email today from the Relationships First Committee, just listing all of the events that are coming up that we're going to do, like Spirit Day and Dress Like a Twin Day, and just things to keep that Relationships First ball moving. And at the same time, she also sent out all the athletic events so that staff are aware and they keep it forefront in their mind and are out there to support our kids. So I just want to say thank you to Bobby and Sally for really taking an active part in doing that. And then also with those professional development days, I want to thank the administrative staff because as we plan and we have different presenters coming in, I need help to get those people where they need to go, to get up to the room they need to be, the tech. Thank you to the tech guys for getting things set up. So a lot of support from people on that day, and I wanted to thank them for that. I also wanted to thank Dan Troutman, Dr. Petushnik, and Mr. Petrie for their time. We did get the PCCD grant submitted by the deadline of August 31st. That was quick, and their support was greatly appreciated to make that happen. So I wanted to thank them. And then later in your agenda, earlier this week, you should have received by email Lankerville's school-wide plan. So we're going to ask for approval for that. And Mr. Eggleston was part of the steering committee for that. So thank you, Mr. Eggleston, for taking the time to do that. If you have any questions about that plan that you folks received, I'd be happy to take them now. And Mr. Harris, I'm sorry, I forgot that you didn't check email and I got yours to you yesterday. So. Not a problem.
Any questions for Mr. Leiter?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have Ms. Jennifer Wick, Supervisor of Special Education.
Good evening. I have other questions on the items that are on the agenda for the CAIU coming in for EL services, which we talked a little bit about last month as well. And also the contracts that are with New Story for our autistic students.
Can you just speak to the ESY agreement for this past summer that we are not seeing until now? And if there's any information about why that's coming to us late?
Just the billing cycle.
So the student that this is for received all of the services that they needed. It was just on backlog on their end. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Troutman, Supervisor of Building and Grounds and School Safety and Security.
Thank you. Good evening. Hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at my report. Just a few things that I wanted to point out. The rally point walks that we had done with this building and Lankerville, I thought went really well. I just wanted to make sure I compliment our students on their behavior. I mean, I feel like they really took it seriously. I don't think we had any major issues that I had heard of anyway. But again, Lankerville went smooth. Middle and high school went very smooth. The school safety assemblies, Mark did a great job at kind of intertwining safety and fun. Again, you're speaking to a different level at the elementary school. Over here, Mr. Shover and I presented, again, my first year as a school safety and security coordinator doing this safety assembly. And again, the students, I feel like, again, we're talking about safety, very serious stuff. And I really would like to commend our students, the way they paid attention, I guess, to the very important kind of sensitive things that we talked about. So certainly the teachers and the other administrators to make the rally point walks, safety assemblies work, they also need to be complimented and thanked for their time and their efforts. Just doesn't happen with me going out and leading the group. There's, again, teachers throughout and so forth. So went smooth, uneventful. So if there's any other questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
All right, thank you, Mr.
You're
Troutman.
welcome.
Mr. Shover, High School Principal Report.
Thank you, Mr. Monagle, and good evening, everyone. I have a report posted there in front of you. There were two items I wanted to just bring to attention. And then if you have any questions, any others, feel free to ask. The social media sites, if you're not aware, at all three levels, elementary, middle, and high now, we have a separate Facebook page, Instagram page, and Twitter page for Lankerville, for middle school and high school. It's already proven to be very effective in communicating with the community and the adults, just judged by the amount of activity that we've had compared to the websites. So if you don't have those addresses, we can send those to you. They're posted on our websites as well. You can click on. And I wanted to just talk a minute about History Day that we had last week. Smashing success, several months in the planning. Again, kudos to our social studies teachers who planned that, starting all the way back middle of last year. Many of us got to go on it, walk at least part of the day. I learned an awful lot in the half day that I was there about the town and the architecture and the trains. Our kids loved it. It was fabulous. The presenters did an incredible job and then thanked us for bringing the kids. And I said, no, thank you for taking the day to present. So that's a definite keeper. I even went to the point and said to Mr. Creek a few others today, I think all our new teachers, we should have them chaperone that trip so that they can learn about the community when they come in here. So I thought it was excellent. The feedback we've gotten has been wonderful. And I wanted to just point that out. So that'll be a every year 9th grade trip coming up. So does anyone have any questions about any of the other items that I have on? It's been a very busy couple of weeks, as it always is at the beginning of school.
How has the response to the Camp Hebron counselors been?
Pretty good. I have a folder with a bunch of applications in it. I still have a couple late ones trickling in. Surprise. I will go through those, check it for eligibility, sign it, and then you go back to Lankerville, and then we can look for the number. But there seems to be a decent amount. I'd like to see more guys. That's been the trend. A lot of girls turn in applications, but they're still coming in.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schober. Moving on to middle school, Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Mrs. McEwen. Hi, everyone. So we had a lot of great positive things happening in middle school, as you can see from my report in front of you. Everything so far has been well received by staff and students, and I think moving us in that relationship first, positive direction. Our win is just getting ready to finally take off as we got all of our data put together and analyzed so that we can look individual students and give them what they need to be successful individually. That might be some reteaching, that might be some enrichment. So giving them what they need to be successful. All hands on deck with that. So kudos to the teachers for being patient, flexible, and looking at really drilling down and doing that individualized work for our students. Our PBIS has been outstanding. I want to give a shout out to our PTO for being so wonderful and giving us some really great gifts. If you ever get down our hall, I might put my name in the box a few times to win a mini fridge in there. The kids have been very motivated to make some positive choices. They're excited about the prizes, which has led to really good role models in our school and making those positive choices. Teachers have been great with recognizing that in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in classrooms, anywhere you see a student, they're looking for opportunities to give out those Tri-5 cards for students to earn these prizes and move forward. The last thing I'll highlight from my notes here was just that each month we're doing a character trait of the month, and so I make that part of our morning announcements. This month we did Be Responsible, and I have to give a shout out. The kids, I gave them a challenge and said, hey, it's on your own free time if you want to make a poster and show others how to be responsible, or a video, or whatever you think of. I had students make a rap song. It was phenomenal. I had a poem, and I had a ton of posters, and they're hanging in the hall as well. So students seem really excited about it. So everything's been positive. We're excited, moving in a good direction, and really building those relationships. Any questions for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Mr. Hamilton for the elementary school.
Hi, everybody. My report's there. One highlight I just want to focus on is our welcome back assembly that we had to kick off the school year. First month of school year, you really want to focus on building relationships, just like our district initiative, but it's really important that staff and students start with that. And so, we're establishing routines, procedures, building relationships. And so in that welcome back assembly, we culminated all of that, where we're talking about our expectations, introducing our tribe cash for the school year, incentivizing that, mixing in some safety and security, and a bunch of fun as well. We had a pin in the mustache on Mr. Hamilton activity, because I can't grow one. We had, which is not good up here. And we also had, we had a potato sack, or potato dump, yeah, in the bucket. And we had a culminating activity of a lip syncing contest with staff. 5 teams went together, and we had Ms. Wick and Mr. Troutman as our 2 of our judges. So the students really, had a fun time learning about school rules, learning about all the incentives they're going to do this year, and seeing their teachers kind of open up and have some fun all in the process. So we're moving forward, PBIS strong, and then this coming month we're continuing with that. We have a few events we're planning. We have our window painting that's coming up on October 17th, as well as the Halloween parade on October 28th. So those are things coming up and exciting things happening. Any questions?
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Item number 15 is Mr. Petrie with the business manager's report.
Yeah, just a couple items that you'll see under action items tonight. There are 2 invoices on there from Crabtree Rohrball, invoice number 6 and 7. We will continue to pay those out of the Pliget accounts, and they are attached under that action item if you want to look at the invoices. The second item, Act 57, and Gareth, if you want to jump in at any point, go ahead. But essentially what this says is that it addresses taxpayers who failed to receive a taxing notice. And it's a requirement for us to pass a resolution as a school district that authorizes our tax collectors to waive those penalty fees in the cases where they did not receive a billing on time. That's pretty much the gist of it. There are some other things that Stock and Leader put out that I have attached in my report if you want to read in more detail, but that's the Reader's Digest version. Gareth, do you have anything you want to add to that?
It's really to address a situation where you purchase a home right after July 1 when the tax bills come out, and if the change in ownership is not reflected in time and the tax bill is forwarded to the old owner, the new owner doesn't get the tax bill and then would be subjected to late fees and penalties. This, if you pass the resolution, would provide a mechanism for the taxpayer to request a waiver of the late fees because they didn't get the notice. It was forwarded to the old owner because of a timing issue. So it's available at all school districts now. If you wish to authorize the waiver, you need to pass the resolution authorizing your tax collector to waive those fees upon request.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll vote on that further down. The next item is the David L. Schlegel transportation contract. Dr. Petushnik and I met with Schlegel's on September 7th, sat down, looked at the bus and van runs, looked at fuel cost and mileage and everything that goes into the contract. This year's contract reflects a 5% increase over the prior year. That 5% is $24,101.62. Of that, $20,244.90 is fuel increases. So, really what they're looking at, if you take fuel out of the equation, they're, less than $4,000 is what they're asking over last year if you take fuel cost aside. Knowing the economy that we're in and how the fuel prices have been fluctuating, not in a good way at times, but so we did discuss with them and they were agreeable if fuel prices, the contract's written on the fuel prices as of September 7th. And we said, hey, let's, if they come down more than 50 cents a gallon from that date, let's get back together and reevaluate the cost here to the district. The same could be true on the opposite side, though, that if it would go up over 50 cents per gallon, that wouldn't be in our favor. But given the uncertainty of the economy, the contract we felt was a fair ask from them, made sense. I mean, obviously, anyone that goes to to get diesel fuel or gas knows where we're at with those prices. So again, 5% increase, the bulk of it is fuel, purely fuel. And again, we'll adjust as we go if need be. Next item at towards the end of the action items, we'll be voting on the PSBA officers. Maybe I should. None of the positions that will be voted on this evening are contested. It's all, if there's one opening, there's one person running for that. So unless we're not going to vote for the one person who's running for that position, those all should be pretty easy. And really, you're just authorizing me to cast the vote on behalf of the board. Lastly, just an informational item. This isn't an action item, but I know we've had conversations between the business office with several of you just in different areas, but we are pursuing looking at getting a district credit card. That's going to require some background work. We're going to need a new policy for that, so that will need to go through committee. We currently do not have one. We're one of the very few districts that does not have a credit card. And it's really, it complicates doing business in today's world, to be honest with you. We're dealing with vendors out there who don't accept purchase orders anymore. A lot of online ordering is only taking credit cards. So purchases would still go through the processes the same way they do now. We're just using a different payment method. So it would still be a requisition, go through the approval. It's just a different method of paying. But as a heads up, just a little background on that, more to come. We'll run that through committee. We'll get some details fleshed out, but that is another thing that we are working on in the business office to make some changes in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. And Dr. Patricia, Superintendent report.
Have some items in under my report tonight. Just as you can see, we have an excellent group of admin staff that's here tonight and just giving their reports of the highlights of the things that are going on here in September. It's always good to celebrate positive things going on within our district. We have plenty of those things that we want to share with the public. And so I'm going to echo maybe from a different lens here, but we had Dr. A in, of course, last week, had to do with student well-being. Assemblies at the elementary, the middle school, and the high school that she gave to the whole group. So every student within the district has had an opportunity to have her present to them. We met Dr. A and each of the principals for the respective grade levels. We had a middle school student council meeting. I will say out of the two that we had a high school student council meeting, I think we were up to 40 some comments in the middle school student council hour that we spent with them. In other words, from one to the other, and excellent feedback from that group of individuals. And the same can be said for the high school. They had a spokesperson. They had some items that they wanted to maybe talk about or discuss going forward that Mr. Shover will be working with myself. So it was good discussion. Good discussion to sit down with the students. And then there was a meeting with the Relationships First Committee. And as Mr. Leiter already spoke about, there's some events coming up in the next month. And looking at it from a staff, student, K-12, it's good discussions. Good discussions for all that are there, and look forward to positive outcomes as a result. And so also want to echo on the local history walk. Just want to say thanks to our district staff that were involved with that. There was some work that went in, a lot of work that went into having that go through. And bottom line is, it was an excellent day from activity, from station to station. If we were to put in an order for great weather for that day, I don't know that we could have got much better weather. Just an all-around good day for those ninth graders, and look forward to doing it here in the future. Same way I want to say to Mr. Eisenberg and the others of the community members. Just a thanks to them, and we've had email communication. Look forward to what we can have in the future. It was a good day. From there, I do want to just announce and maybe get some input from community stakeholders. I did have a conversation with Jim Prince about the Maroon and Gold Foundation. We have a current need to have some input or to use that 501c3 organization, and basically there's a local company that there's a potential for them to do a donation, and they need to do it to a 501c3. And so when speaking with Mr. Prince, there's been some challenges since COVID hit of how regular the meetings were. So anyone here, anyone listening online, if you know someone who was participated in the past, if you would reach out to me. In the same way, if there's individuals who are interested in coming on board as new members of that foundation to sort of revive that group of individuals, please contact me, all right, to get the word out on the Maroon and Gold Foundation. We look for big things here going forward on that. I do want to share that we're still, Dan Troutman, who seems to know everyone in Millersburg, and their kids and their cousins. We've been doing some business and industry tours, and back in August 18th, we toured Thermo Fisher, September 8th, Mountain Ridge Metals. We're going to be going and visiting Albert Polk and Heritage Cutter. And so part of that is to have a better understanding of the jobs that are local to Millersburg, the opportunities for our students, but also as we look to this year, next year, 2 years from now, can we start to have those relationships where there's opportunities for students to have job shadows, internships, and opportunities while they're in high school here? And so there's some links potentially down the road that we're also looking to do. And I know from all of the companies we've visited so far, there's a willingness on their end, just as the shortage is everywhere, to be able to do that here in the future. So looking for good things coming out of that. Do want to talk about sports real quick. We had, just want to express congratulations to Jana Strait. She was one of 8 students nominated for our Max Preps Pennsylvania High School Athlete of the Week nominee last Monday. The votes were due. I know I spoke with Cody there, and I did some Googling too. I still can't find, nor have we been notified one way or the other of the results. And I reached out in an email and I haven't heard back yet. But just want to congratulate Jana on being one of 8 athletes for that week for girls soccer, nominated throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So that was a great accomplishment. In addition to that, I just want to, communicate that we are going to be doing a student interest survey. I have Mr. Godsey here tonight too, if there's any questions, but we had sat down, and Mr. Shover, Cody, myself, to try and get an idea of what might look different for that survey for potential sports that we don't currently offer. And so we have some ideas there. We had talked about maybe designating a day, maybe a specific period in the middle school. We had talked about today in the admin meeting, where everyone in maybe the win period, we're going to take 10 minutes and we're going to complete this survey. The same way, maybe we're going to take homeroom, and if we have to extend it a minute or two, but basically to be able to get that survey completed so that we have a better data than maybe what we received the last time around, and to take a look there. There's probably going to be, or there's potential to also have a survey more designated to the parents that would also discuss maybe transportation needs. So I think we talked about transportation to the students who are already enrolled potentially in some sports last time. And this would be to parents of maybe students who haven't participated in a sport. And maybe that was, to see if that is in fact a barrier or not a barrier at all, maybe to get some data there. So more to come on that, but the ball is rolling in that area. So more to come on that. Would like to just congratulate, going down through several sports here, our girls volleyball, doing an excellent job so far, and all of our teams, girls soccer, boys soccer, of course our football team, our golf team, and our junior high basketball. just being able to have those students participate. And of course, as teams, some are younger, some are more experienced, but they're all out there giving it their best. And I want to congratulate every one of them that had the opportunity to watch. Communication, just want to talk about this for a second because we did talk about the social media we have our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. And of course, just for ways that we are getting our information out to the district. Of course, we do have those 3 accounts. We have a district account with that social media. And then also, there has been some feedback on our district website. And so we had the opportunity today to listen to a presentation or to see a presentation from a company called Blackboard, who we currently have our software through. And we are very much hoping to bring back here in the next month or two for approval a new contract with Blackboard that would allow us to update our website. So some of the challenges that we've experienced with our current website, a refresh is much needed, and we're looking forward if it is in fact Blackboard, we do believe they have some really good features that we don't currently have right now. But as far as communicating right now, it's social media and then through our website, and we're hoping to improve that. Cyber charter schools, just want to share that we are getting preliminary invoices in. And so over the summer, you're not quite sure who's going to show up on the first day. We are, when I say we, Mr. Petrie's receiving those invoices in the business office. Currently, right now, we're +5 students compared to where we were at the end of the last school year. We will be having conversations at the HR committee level of maybe some strategies to how are we going to sit back and watch the numbers continue to grow, or are we going to try and take some steps to try and see those numbers decrease in the future here? So more to come from that standpoint out of the HR committee. Do want to just share too with our safety and security grants that was spoke about. So what we are presented and what was submitted was exterior door alarms on every door from this building and Lankerville. Additional cameras in blind spots that there's areas that you can't see on the cameras. And also looking at cameras on buses to upgrade and bring those up to date. All of these items in the next one also will come back for approval at the board level, but this was what was submitted. So once we get the green light from PDE, we'll be bringing those back for approval. So it doesn't mean all because we submitted for them that is automatically going to be done. For the mental health grant, we do have a position in there for a middle school guidance counselor. And so that would be all of that grant, which would cover this year's salary and benefits, and then also a partial part of next year. And so those are all 9 items there of my report for tonight, if there's any questions. All right, I think we're on the board action.
Okay, sounds good. So item 17AA deals with van and bus drivers. The administration is recommending that the following Schlegel Transportation Company employees as van and bus drivers be approved for the 2022-23 school year. They are listed as Abigail Steiner and Brent Thorney. Do I have a motion? Mr. Miller, second, Mr. Enders. Any board question or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungle,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Marvel, do we ask Gareth to,
He just got my attention. I forgot he was supposed to be up first.
okay.
I did write it down and totally ignored my note.
So board members came to my attention late this afternoon that there's a need to ask for board approval of the Professional Development Steering Committee. Mr. Petrie, Dr. Petrie, would you read those names, please, for the audience, the names of the proposed committee members?
All right, so this is for the steering committee of the professional development plan of our comprehensive planning process. As a community representative, we have Chris Dietz, another community representative, Scott Eisenberg, We have a Stacy Troutman as a business representative and Eric Leluchuk as a business representative. Missy Long as a parent, Jenna Troutman as a parent, and then Josh Eggleston and Cindy Gray from the board. So those would be all of the individuals that would need to be
Okay.
board appointed.
Since this was not listed on the published agenda in advance, only the board at this point could amend the agenda. If you wish to add this item, it would be added as new item, action item 17N. And then we'll get to 17N and vote on it. But the first step would be to ask if there's a motion to amend the agenda to add the appointment of the steering committee members as listed. So is there a motion to do that? Okay, in a second. Mr. Andrews.
So motion by Mr. Miller and second by Mr. Enders to add a new agenda item 17N for the approval of the professional development steering committee with members as stated by Dr. Petition.
Yes.
Okay, Eric, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungol,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Who made the motion and second on that?
Mr. Miller was the motion and Mr. Enders was the second.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Do we, Gareth, do we also need to add an item do we need to make a motion for PFM for their authorization to proceed?
I don't believe that's the agenda for this evening.
It's-
Mrs. Doyle, but
It's not. It was part of her, do you need that
Not
motion
tonight,
tonight? You don't
no,
need it tonight?
No.
Perfect, okay.
once we get down to 17, we'll.
Okay, moving to 17A-B, mentor teachers. The administration is recommending the appointment of Mrs. Lauren Dybert as mentor teacher for Mrs. Laura Hunsinger for the 22-23 school year at a stipend of $400. And the appointment of Mrs. Tracy Barkavich as mentor teacher for Ms. Meredith Savage for the 22-23 school year at a stipend of $400 prorated. Do I have a motion to approve? Mr. Eggleston? Can we do the motion and the second and then board comments and questions? Do I have a second? Mr. Enders? Board questions and comments?
Yes, are we approving mentor teachers for people that are not employees yet?
I believe both of those teachers are employees.
There's an approval down the list for both of them. Unless I'm reading this completely wrong. Age.
So yes, the way that it would have been placed on the agenda, it would have been prior
Okay, so
to.
we're not
Age
going
should
to, I'm taking, we're not going to assign them help before we hire them, right? Or am I reading wrong?
No, what you have brought up was that they should have been the other way. Recommended for employment should have been before the mentor teachers.
So we just amend that?
So do we have to change the letter or?
Yeah, I have no objection to the way it's listed. Ideally, the sequence would have been, as you noted, obviously, if they're not, the board does not approve their hires, there would be no need for mentoring and the stipend, so it would be a moot item at that point. But it's up to the board.
So we,
So as listed.
so we can do it in the order that the agenda is without any legal
My opinion,
ramifications.
yes, yes. Call for the vote, yeah. There's been a motion in a second.
Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
No.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17AC is a staff reassignment. The administration is recommending the reassignment of Mrs. Lisa Beck from a part-time kindergarten aide to a part-time Title I aide. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, second, Mrs. Gray. Any board member questions or discussion? Mr. Keegan?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17AD is approval of substitute teachers. The administration is recommending adding the following individuals to the 22-23 sub list. Mrs. Jill Herb, Mrs. Kaylee Murray, and Mrs. Paige Allman. I need to do letter C separately, so can I have a motion for 17AD, item A and B for Mrs. Jill Herb and Miss Kaylee Murray?
So moved.
Mr. Miller, motion, Mr. Enders, second. Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve Mrs. Paige Allman as a substitute for the 22-23 school year? Motion by Mrs. Gray, second by Mr. Enders. Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Abstain.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Item 17AE is supplemental contracts for athletics. The administration is recommending Mr. Ryan Shoup as an assistant boys soccer coach for the 22-23 school year at a stipend of $1,615. And Mr. Robert Cotsey recommends Mrs. Bree Smith as a volunteer volleyball coach for the 22-23 school year, and there is no stipend for this position. Do I have a motion for items?
I'm sorry, I just have a question for Gareth. If one of the individuals on here works for me, should I abstain or,
Works for you?
yes,
Yeah, I would.
Okay. that's what we thought, but just
Okay,
making sure.
So you
Sorry.
would like those separate?
Separate, please,
Okay,
yes,
so
thanks.
can I have a motion for item 17AE, item number 1, for Mr. Ryan Shoup as assistant boys soccer coach? So motion by Mr. Enders, second by Mr. Eggleston. Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Abstain.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, a motion for 17AE, item number 2, for Mrs. Bree Smith as volunteer volleyball coach for the 22-23 school year.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Eggleston. Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
All right, moving on, 17AF, athletic event worker. The administration recommends adding the following individual to the 22-23 athletic event worker list. The stipend for this position will be based on the event and task performed. Item A is Mr. Daniel Hooper, and item B is Mrs. Carrie Cover, pending the receipt of clearances. Do I have a motion for 17AF? Motion by Mr. Eggleston, second by Mr. Enders. Board question or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17AG is a leave request. The administration recommends the approval of FMLA leave for employee 222301 on or about November 29th, 2022, in accordance with board policy 435, child rearing leave and family medical leaves. Do I have a motion for 17AG? Mr. Enders, second, Mrs. Gray, Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17AH, recommendations for employment. The administration is recommending Ms. Meredith Savage of Millersburg, Pennsylvania, as a high school English teacher effective September 13th, 2022 at step 6 master's level, $54,375 of the current collective bargaining agreement for professional employees. Ms. Savage is a graduate of Mansfield University. The approval is contingent upon receipt of emergency permit and conditional upon obtaining permanent certification. Do I have a motion? Mr. Enders, second, Mr. Miller. Board questions or comments?
Define permanent certification. Permanent certification.
So currently, this employee will be hired under an emergency permit. So certified in one area, but teaching in a different area. And so this emergency permit is allowing them time to take a praxis test to be certified in the area of English, ELA.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17AI is resignations. There are two listed. It is recommended to accept the resignation of Ms. Jillian Falkroad as assistant volleyball coach effective immediately. And it is recommended to accept the resignation of Mr. Mike Orwin as a substitute custodian effective immediately. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, second, Mr. Enders, board member questions or comments? Mr. Miller?
So my understanding then is that we have now a volunteer volleyball coach, but no assistant volleyball coach. The assistant was a paid position. We voted earlier on Bree Smith being a volunteer coach, so we are minus one position. Are we advertising for that position, or is that going to remain unfilled?
We would look to fill that position, and it's something we can bring back in October as a retroactive if the HR committee would want to discuss of moving that individual up to the paid position.
Is that already in the works, or is that being posted, or do we know anything about
So it'd be advertised. I literally just texted Cody to say, you're good to go for the night. And so he just walked out
that? He
about.
bounced, okay, cool.
And so,
But you posting it right now.
so from that standpoint, I would imagine that is in the works. It would be my understanding that would be in the works to be filled.
So we're looking for a new assistant to fill Mrs. Fulbroad's kind of always there JV coach position, and then not fill Mr. Bullock. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yeah.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item number 17AJ, the CAIU Leadership Conference. It is recommended for approval for Dr. Petitioning to attend the CAIU Fall Leadership Conference in Annapolis, Maryland, November 2nd through the 4th, 2022. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston? Second? Mr. Miller? Any board member questions or comments?
A few quick ones. Mr. Miller, as the representative, why does the capital area intermediate unit have to go to Maryland? We pay to belong to that organization, do we not?
We do pay to belong to that organization, yes.
And so does every other member.
Yes.
And they take it to Maryland. That's very confusing to me. I would appreciate it if you, as our representative, could find out what the reasoning for that is.
I will be meeting, their next meeting is Thursday. I will find out for you.
Yeah.
I don't have an
That
answer.
makes no sense.
I don't have an answer for you, and that's a valid question.
I think so.
Sure.
They're shooting the
Absolutely.
people who support them in the foot.
Absolutely.
So I would appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17C, Ascend Career Services LLC. The administration recommends approval 17, I didn't, okay, 17B, sorry. Special Education Consultant. The administration recommends contracting through ESS for Lisa Conrad as a special education consultant at a daily rate of $598.50, not to exceed 25 days. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, second. Mrs. Gray? Board member questions or comments?
Yeah, I just have a question. So I think this is the thing we talked about in exec with the contract for ESS. Are we okay with the way the motion is written? It kind of sounds like we are, that we'll only cover the special ed consultant, and we'll get that contract clarified. Does that sound right?
Yeah, as I read the motion, Mr. Minnick, it's limited only to the special education consultant and no other positions. But again, I will recommend that Dr. Petushnik reach out to ESS to request an amended contract, so it's clear that it only applies for that service only.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
No.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, now item 17C, Ascend Career Services LLC. The administration is recommending approval of the contract with Ascend Career Services LLC as attached. Do I have a motion? Mr. Enders, second. Mrs. Gray. Board member questions or comments?
This is specified for this Spanish position only.
So out of the HR committee, we were going to give first shot to our open Spanish position that we're unable to fill at this point. And so yes, as of right now, it'll be Spanish and then we'll reevaluate.
We're approving the headhunting of a Spanish teacher. Anything else is not approved at this point.
Correct, and the idea was we're gonna continue with the services that are free or next to free for our positions. This is sort of an additional avenue to go to find extremely hard positions
Right.
to fill. So
This is our dipping the toe into the water for this position, not everything.
Not a blanket.
The assistant volleyball position, something like that.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we get, do we have any kind of pricing from this outfit? Or is this similar to the other one that we had,
So this
where
one,
we don't find out what it's costing us until after we sign the contract?
nope, so this one is part of that agreement there. What it basically says is 10% of the first year's salary. So let's just say $50,000 annual salary, it's $5,000 for this service. If we don't hire anyone, the cost is zero.
All right, so we're, okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I
Yes.
do.
Okay.
So we're doing this because there's nobody. Nobody is putting in to be a Spanish teacher at Millersburg Area High School.
And as of next Friday, that following Monday, we will have to revert to one teacher and maximizing and changing student schedules as it stands right now if we're not able to find someone.
So everybody knew what that was.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
No.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
All right, item 17D is ESS Northeast LLC staffing agreement. The administration recommends to contract with ESS as a third-party employment service. Do I have a motion?
Given our discussion in executive session and our vote on 17B a moment ago, it may be appropriate to table this item.
Do I have a motion to table item
I move to table it.
17D?
Yes.
Motion by Mr. Enders, Mr. Miller, motion by Mr. Miller,
Got it.
second by Mr. Enders to table
To table.
item 17D.
This is the substitute portion of that thing. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, no, thank you, yes.
Got it.
Okay. Any board member questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17E is the Title I school-wide plan. The administration recommends the approval of the Title I school-wide plan. Do I have a motion? Mr. Enders, second, Mr. Eggleston. Board member questions or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17F is an MOU for the PA State Police. The administration recommends the approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the Pennsylvania State Police. The MOU establishes procedures to be followed when certain incidents occur on school property at any school-sponsored activity or a conveyance as described in the Safe Schools Act. Do I have a motion? Mr. Enders, second, Mr. Eggleston, board member questions or comments?
I did confirm, Dr. Petrucci, this is the correct version from Safe Schools.
Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17G is an overnight field trip request. The administration recommends approval for Tracy Barcavage, Natalie Latchall, and 7 students to attend the Student Council Conference in Boyerstown, PA, November 4th and 5th, 2022. This trip will include an overnight stay on November 4th. motion for approval? Mr. Enders, second, Mr. Eggleston. Board member questions or comments?
I just have a question just to make sure, since my kid is one of those kids involved, I don't have to abstain.
No, Mr. Minnick, it's not, there's no financial
Right.
impact involved. You certainly may abstain if you wish to, but you wouldn't be required to under the Ethics Act.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17H is approval of Crabtree, Rohrbaugh and Associates invoices numbers 6 and 7. Crabtree, Rohrbaugh and Associates has submitted the attached invoice number 6 in the amount of $47,332.76, and invoice number 7 in the amount of $73,320.96 for payment of professional services from July 1st, 2022 to July 31st, 2022, and August 1st, 2022 to August 31st of 2022. These invoices will be paid from the 2022 GO bond issue. It is recommended that these invoices be approved for payment. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, do I have a second? Mrs. Gray, board member questions or comments? Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
No.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17I, the CAIU agreement for English language development services. It is the recommendation of the administration to approve the 2022-2023 agreement for English language development with the Capital Area Intermediate Unit as attached. Do I have a motion? Mr. Miller, second. Mr. Enders, board member questions or comments?
How many students are involved with this?
Ms. Witt, can you speak to the number of students that are involved with this agreement?
This is the, you just say it more.
Yep, the English language development services.
So at this time, we lost 2 students who had moved, so I would say we're around 8 students.
Thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments?
This is for ESL. This is the non.
So we don't have a specific
Correct,
person,
right.
so we contract those services. That's for the contracted services.
Other questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17J is the Act 57 resolution. Do I have a motion to approve the Act 57 resolution as listed tonight? Mr. Eggleston, second, Mr. Enders. Any board member questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17K, we have the 2022-2023 student transportation contract. It is recommended by the administration to approve the 2022-2023 student transportation contract with the David L. Schlegel Transportation Company as attached. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, second. Mrs. Gray? Board member questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Abstain.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17L, new story tuition agreements. It is recommended by the administration to approve the following tuition agreements with the New Story LLC for 3 Millersburg students, and those contracts are attached. Do I have a motion? Mr. Eggleston, second. Mrs. Gray, board member questions or comments?
Yeah, what's the total cost for these 3 students? Ballpark will do.
The total cost for those three. Let's see. I'd have to do some math here, so 365 times 180.
I was going to add, I didn't know multiplication was involved. That's a calculated problem.
It's expensive.
That's, yeah, it's not calculus.
For the student at 385 a day, that would be at around 69,000 just for the one student who would be at 385.
Second one's 240 a day.
It's about 43,000.
Third is, if it opens, it's hanging. There we go. Third one is 289 a day.
So about 52,000, so about 42,052.
$164,000.
Is that, yeah, what's the transportation cost in that also?
Yeah,
It
so,
is 235 and 236 and 245 per day.
right. In the school contract.
And why couldn't we get these kids in the same
Different schools provide
stores?
Different services.
Sealandsburg and New Cumberland do different
And there's
And
that
or-
much different that,
things, and or have different availability.
did we check in that?
I think, and Ms. Witt can explain, but I think to speak to it, some of it comes down to the time of year and the availability at that point in time too of that initial placement. But go ahead.
It's that, and it's also the fact that New Story charges a rate, a daily rate based on need. So if that child's needs are significant, that gets you into a higher cost point, or if they're less significant, but they're all full-time autistic support.
And they're receiving services that we can't provide for them here in our district, but are required to by law because of their IEP special needs.
Severe need.
But we couldn't get them all in the same,
So
Place.
again, there's.
did we try to get them in the
Mr.
same place as where I'm
Mr.
at?
Miller said, it has a lot to do with what each school is focusing on, it has to do with that particular child's need, and it also has to do with openings. So at the time of year, for example, that we had a need for the one student to receive full-time support, there were no openings at the facilities that we were already using, which required us to go to Selinsgrove.
Did we check since the beginning of the year if there was an opening at the same school is where I'm trying to, so we're not spending the extra 50,000 to go one school and they could all go together.
Understood, but the needs of that particular student and the fact that being autistic, the need for consistency and success in that program, our whole goal is to, as quickly as possible, if possible, have them come back to a least restrictive environment so that child is being successful where they are. And then that played into the decision to want them to continue in that particular program.
Any other
questions?
Middle school students, high school students? Where-
So these are all elementary between K and 6.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
No,
Mrs. Gray,
No.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, item 17M. This is our discussion and voting on PSBA officer candidates. So we heard Mr. Petrie say there's one candidate for each position, and we are making a motion to give him the approval to cast our vote yes for all of those.
Yeah, I think the
Positions.
exception is G for the PSBA insurance trustee. There are actually 2 open spots and 2 people running. But it is true that for all the positions, there's,
Okay, so
all candidates are running unopposed.
okay, so there's more than one person, but both of them can be,
Correct.
so we can do all of these at one time?
You may, if you like, sure.
Okay, so do I have a motion to accept, approve?
You would authorize the secretary to cast the ballot.
Do I have a motion to authorize Mr. Petrie to cast a ballot for candidates 17MA through 17MG?
So move/authorize.
Mr. Miller, second. Mr. Eggleston, questions or comments?
So I do. So you only have one person running as president and vice president? Question mark? So who becomes vice president?
Maybe.
How do that work?
I don't know. That's a good question.
please vote.
Maybe he gets to pick who is vice
Have
president.
you ever been to those meetings?
No.
Listen, I
How's
don't
it
think
working
that's
out for
our
you?
concern right
Figure
now.
that out.
I know.
It's not. Any other questions or concerns?
Tough crowd.
Okay, Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes,
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Okay, our last agenda action item is the new addition for item 17N.
17N.
Okay, so do I have a motion for the approval of the Professional Development Steering Committee as listed by Dr. Petushnik earlier in our meeting? Mr. Miller, second. Mr. Enders. Anyone in the audience have a comment on?
Yeah, I just want to know how they picked the parents.
How many per-
I didn't hear you.
Not in the video.
Mr. Leiter, can you answer the question how the parents were chosen for the Professional Development Steering Committee?
Just recommended people that, I spoke to a few people and asked if they'd be interested in participating.
And they
I
accepted.
said yes.
That's frustrating to me.
I'm sorry, what?
It's frustrating that they just picked 2 people. And I don't know, here we are coming to these meetings and as a parent, I would like to be part of stuff like that.
Can we have more?
That, absolutely.
I think that's a very good point. I believe this young lady comes to pretty much every meeting. I think that's a very good point. Very good point. Yeah. I recommend we have her on. All 4.
All right, so then So my question was, there's multiples. Yeah. So we said about two. So is coming back, Mr. Harris, are we looking at both? Because we said there's two here, correct? Yes.
I
So
might
that's,
have to find out more information about the committee a little bit, but I can let you guys know.
all right. So,
Well,
A
If
crystal.
if I can, the comprehensive planning process has subcomponents. The professional development plan is one. The induction plan is another. Both of those will require a steering committee. And then there's the overall plan, which is the comprehensive plan. So there's steering committees for three different things. So there was no intention of leaving anyone out, but we needed to start on the professional development one, and that's the only one that requires board action. So there's three steering committees. There's one that required board action, and that's why those folks were chosen. So we could get that committee created because it required board action. There's still two other committees.
So is there, if we approve the list tonight, is there anything preventing additional committee members joining that steering committee at meetings?
no, it would just be at the direction of administration as far as for having that
And
input.
and I did not talk about it at the last Relationships First meeting. One of the things Dr. A and I had talked about was in taking the Relationships First committee, which these good ladies are a part of, and including that into the steering committee for the comprehensive plan.
So by approving the list of names that was read to us earlier, that is not an
only-
exclusive list.
No, that is
for this.
only for
That's
the
just getting
professional
us-
development plan.
And that's just getting us started with the thing that needed board approval tonight. This is going to be,
Correct. It sounds like we should be fine with the list that's provided tonight because there's opportunities in these other committees and part of the Relationships First committee. So,
Just so it's not forgotten.
noted.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Eggleston,
Yes.
Mr. Enders,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Harris.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Mungold,
Yes.
Mr. Novinger,
No.
Mr. Peterson,
yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yeah,
Okay. We already did that.
All right, so as part of our monthly meeting, the number 18 enrollment, the enrollment report is just informational from that standpoint. And then we would go into board member sharing after that for 19.
Okay, so, okay, so I will start with board member sharing. I just have a quick couple of things to mention. As a parent in the district, I have a middle schooler and 2 elementary schoolers. And I just wanted to point out that our conversations around the dinner table these first few weeks of school have been a joy. Everyone is loving the morning announcements, although I will have to say, Mr. Hamilton, my youngest was almost considering cheering against her team for the sake of a teacher winning some sort of prize because they wanted the Bengals to win. We were gonna have to talk about that, but I appreciate the help that we are getting from the administrators at the elementary school and the middle school level. We are the kind of parents at home that constantly, like, we don't just accept good, where we want to know what's good. And this year, there's a little bit more excitement. Like the 2 little elementary school kids are fighting over who gets to tell us what teacher predicted the Bengals to beat the Cowboys, which did not happen, by the way. And other things that I think are great, I've heard lots of positive community feedback from the social media accounts. I think parents very much appreciate feeling like they are connected. So hopefully we can continue to spread the word. And I heard lots of positive things about the History Day field trip for our ninth graders, from staff, from students, and from the parents that got to tag along as chaperones. So I think that it is super important that we as a district don't just send an email saying thank you, but a more personalized thank you, a handwritten thank you, I think goes a long way for things like that. And I know Mr. Eisenberg is very committed to our town and our school district. So I think that that's something that if it was as much of a success as it was this year, I hope we can continue to do it and board members can be part of it, because it sounds like a really awesome thing. So, yes.
I did want to comment, Mrs. Klinger put together a doc that just got done today. She had each one of the kids write responses to them. Every
Fantastic.
individualized, and that's going to be going back. So they're going to be hearing individual comments from the kids who participated.
Awesome. And then another thing just about communication, in addition to the social media accounts, I think it's great. We've gotten several emails reminding us about the safety walk and sending dry socks. And so the teachers are also doing a really great job as individuals, keeping parents in the loop. So I appreciate, I know Seesaw is like, that's at the lower elementary level, and that's working wonderfully. So I appreciate that as a parent, and I think everybody is doing a fantastic job to start this school year. So I know there were a lot of parents concerned, like, everybody's new, what's going to happen? We've got all these new teachers, we've got new administrators, and I think everyone is pleasantly surprised. So kudos to you guys. I appreciate that as a board member and a parent and an educator. So thank you. That's it for me. Anyone else? Board member Sharon?
I'll echo with the history thing. I heard a bunch of great feedback. And I'd like to thank the administration, the teachers, everybody. I see them out in the community now more than I have ever seen. At sporting events, I'm seeing all the administration out and about. It's a great feeling as a board member to see you guys everywhere. Thank you, guys.
I do have one other thing. The special band event, I attended with the joint bands from Upper Dauphin and Millersburg on our football fields, soccer fields, and our band is amazing. So if you haven't gotten a chance to see them, they really are doing a fantastic job. And I know that some board members had some questions about, what does this agreement look like? How are we going to make this work? And from what I have seen, it has been fantastic. So I appreciate the teachers and the students putting in the hard work and the time and the effort to make that successful. Now I am. Anyone else? Board member Sharon? Mr. Miller?
I'd like to echo what Dr. Potishnik mentioned with the maroon and gold. Specifically, I used to be on maroon and gold before being a board member. You can't do both. But if you want to affect change and have say over an impact in a bunch of scholarships and where those 501c3 monies go, it's really a good organization. And I'm looking forward to what it looks like now with different administration and different people in the maroon and gold. It didn't work great when I was there, probably because of me, but no. But that is a place where change can happen. So I would encourage anybody that's interested in that, in YouTube world or here, to join that. And I also wanted to echo Dr. Tushnik and Mr. Shover showing up at the volleyball games. Was awesome, was noticed by tons of people, and was a really positive thing for the girls and parents. So I just wanted to say thank you for that as well.
I can add to that too, because Miss Owen not only attended a Millersburg middle school basketball game, but she made the long trek to Greenwood to visit a Millersburg middle school girls basketball game, probably right in her backyard. But the girls really thought that was cool. There's only 6 of them, so fans that aren't their parents are really special. So they appreciated that very, very much.
Double overtime soccer
Yes.
game last night was incredible, but I wish we could have scored a point.
Any other board members? Mr. Minnick? Are you-
Yeah, I have things. First thing, just for the board's knowledge, so we were talking to Tom Templeton about a meeting early in October to kind of do some of the last things kind of associated with Dr. Pajushnik's becoming our new superintendent. So we are still, I'm waiting to hear back from him on a day. The date that was picked did not work for enough board members. So keep an eye out for that. When I get another date, I will let you know. Please check your email and get back to me when you see that, just so we can try and keep that process moving, get that finished. Just an update. I think at the last meeting, we talked about needing when are we going to get back together about the sports co-op. I talked to Upper Dauphin's board president a couple times now. We're trying to get a date together when we can kind of have a leadership meeting just to talk about the meeting and plan an agenda and then get some dates out to you guys. Hopefully that will happen real soon. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but since I'm out of town, that really doesn't work. So more to come on that in the very near future. Let's see. Kind of to echo, I did do a couple of sporting events as I've been kind of busy this month, but everything looks great. The kids are doing well. The band is rocking at the football games. I will say the Upper Dauphin band won first place in the competition on Saturday, so they're doing really good too. We do have some kids on that band as well. So if you're around Thursday or Friday afternoon, head up to the Gratz Fair and you can get to see both those bands performing again. I think it'd be a good time. And yeah, lots of good things happening. I'm really excited about how this year's going so far. Administration is out and about. Teachers are doing things. It's really great. So hopefully everybody can keep it up. So that's all I have. Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Mongol, for running the meeting tonight in my absence.
You're welcome. Any other business? Motion to adjourn. Mr. Harris. Thank you. Here, can I have a second?
Yep.
I'm just getting so don't regular education.
Sorry, I did not mean to be rude. But my phone is in my car. That's really giving.